So I've got a little bit of a story I want to share about fairies because I believe in them. And I think I actually saw one at least once. I think I've seen them more than once, but I definitely am convinced I saw a fairy at least once. And yeah, so I was just going to share that story. So anyway, I would say it was in the last few years. I'm not going to say exactly when, because I tend to go off on tangents, and I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent. So anyway, but within the last several years, I saw a fairy, and yeah, so I'm just talking about it. I'm not quite sure how to introduce it, though, because I'm not sure if I need to talk about the background to the fairy or if I just need to talk about the experience seeing the fairy. I guess what I'll say is that it was right around the time I started to find out about fairies, but I sort of believed in them, but I wasn't actively trying to find them or see them. I was just kind of oh, people say that fairies are real. That's interesting. But I wasn't actually trying to see them, and I wasn't really thinking about fairies much or anything. I was just kind of oh, that's cool, whatever. And so within about a month of that, and again, this was in the last few to several years, I was on my bed. I was crying a lot because there was something going on, and I was very emotional about it. And I believed in angels, and so I started trying to, after an hour of crying, and when I cry, usually it's pretty silent, but every now and then I cry very kind of strongly, and it will basically cause me to sound like a banshee. I will just wail and wail and wail, and it was one of those, which was pretty rare for me, but it happens. And so I was really crying pretty profusely and could not stop, and I lost so much energy. I'd been crying for probably about an hour about a lot going on, and I just didn't have the energy left. So I believed in angels, and I was thinking I was talking to my angels. I didn't specify that I was talking to my angels. I just assumed that was obvious. And so I said, please make it stop. And I said that out loud. When I said, please make it stop, I'd say within 5 seconds, probably more 2 seconds, it was the intense need to cry, and just all of that energy for crying was just gone. And I felt fine. The pain was pretty much gone. And all I was really left with was that feeling that you have after a really long time crying where you feel exhausted. And that was about it. I didn't have anything left as far as the pain. And I look at the foot of my bed, because I was sitting on my bed, crying on my bed. And I was sitting on my bed, sitting up. And I see at the foot of my bed this little 8 to 12 inch, I think it was a man. I don't know if it was a male fairy, but I think it was a man. But it was kind of hard to tell. But anyway, but it was this little fairy, I guess, and it was 8 to 12 inches on the foot of my bed. And it just kind of waved at me and looked at me, and it had, I don't know if it was a white robe or a white aura. I'm thinking it was the glow from it, but I honestly at the time thought it was a robe. And I will just say this because I didn't understand what fairies were really, and I was open to the idea of them, but I didn't think in that moment I was seeing a fairy. I actually thought, wow, angels are really tiny. I remember thinking angels are so small, and I just assumed it was an angel because I saw what looked like a white robe. But I've heard that when people see fairies, they sometimes see a glow. So I think maybe what I was seeing was a glow. But anyway, it was 8 to 12 inches, really tiny, and it had it was adorable. It had shoulder length hair, and I couldn't really see its face. But anyway, so but I could see its hair, and its hair was shoulder length, and like I said, I couldn't really see its face very well. But I could see this white, I don't know if it was a white robe, a white aura, a white glow. It was really hard to tell, but it was something it was engulfed in white. And anyway, but it waved at me and then was and I remember it kind of turning and waving at me, and I just stared at it really confused. And then within probably 10 seconds, it was gone. Like, it was like, I remember it seemed actually like it kind of, now it's like coming back, but I remember it was like it walked or flew or something. It moved forward. I wasn't looking at its feet. I don't even know if I could see its feet, but I just remember seeing it kind of move forward a little bit at the foot of my bed. And then it turned a little bit, if I remember right. And then I definitely remember it waving at me, and then it was gone. So it was probably gone within about 10 seconds. And it looked a lot like, you know, in those movies, like, I don't watch like Star Trek or Star Wars or any of that, but I've seen bits and pieces of them. And I think I've seen like 1 or 2 of the movies in their entirety. But that was like a really long time ago when I was a kid, probably. But if I remember the little holographic, like, whatever those things are where you see them and it's not actually them, but they're like a few inches tall and it's like that holograph, that's kind of what it looked like. It was like a little sheer. I couldn't see. It wasn't fully visible, but it was mostly there. But anyway, so that's what it looked like and that's what happened. However, at the time, I thought that that it was an angel, and I just thought, wow, that's a really small angel. I had no idea angels were that small. Well, fast forward, like, I don't know, a year later, something like that, I was talking to a woman who's psychic, and I was talking to her about that, and she said, oh, that wasn't an angel. Angels are way bigger than that. Angels, like, protect you. They're a lot bigger than that. That was a fairy. And I thought, oh, a fairy. I don't know why I didn't think it was a fairy, because it was the size you would typically associate with a fairy. But anyway, then she said that I was a fairy in a past life, which might make sense if you believe in fairies and you believe in past lives, which I believe in fairies and I believe in past lives. She said that I was a fairy and that's why they were kind of there helping me. But anyway, I don't know. It was just kind of interesting. So I've also seen fairy lights, but that was the most concrete experience seeing a fairy. And it's the only time I've really, really seen a fairy. Like, I've seen fairy lights a bunch. I think they're fairy lights. And I've seen little, like, floating, they look like tiny little floating puffs of smoke sometimes. Usually when I'm like, it's been a long time, honestly. I haven't seen it since I lived there. I haven't seen the little puffs of smoke, but it was around that time, and I think I was singing, and I could see, like, these little, it looked like water vapor or something, a few inches wide, which also, that could be a fairy. So anyway, but since then, I've seen fairy lights a bunch. In fact, I still see fairy lights. I think they're fairy lights, because I live in the woods. I lived in the woods back then, and I live in the woods now. But anyway, but I don't see them as obviously anymore. Like, I think those were more noticeable. I don't know why I could see them then and can't see them as easily now. But anyway, but yeah. So anyway, I do see lights though, but usually they're like individual lights, which is why I think they're fairy lights. I don't think they're angel lights, because I think angel lights might be more like almost like a sprinkling of a bunch of lights at once. But I don't know if that's always the case. But anyway, so yeah, but I do see little, like, they're like little individual white Christmas lights. Sometimes they're not white though. Sometimes, like, I'll see a little, again, they might not always be fairies, but sometimes I'll see little silver lights. I'll see little blue lights. I often see little white lights. Probably at least like once a week. And then I even sometimes see like little pink lights. Anyway, don't know what it is, or what they are, because they happen a bunch, so it's a bunch of them. But anyway, so yeah, that's my experience seeing a fairy, I think. But anyway.